With the recent shootings of Alton Sterling and Philando Castille, and then the subsequent shootings of the Dallas police force, racial tensions in this country haven't been higher since OJ got acquitted. Now, criticisms from the right claim that there's absolutely no racial biases in police shootings, and they're actually proportional to what they're supposed to be.
Far more white people in the United States are killed by police. When you actually take into account police interactions or people being arrested, so an actual interaction with a police officer, white people are more likely to be shot by police than black people.
However, in the new Jim Crow laws written by Michelle Alexander, you get an excellent look at the ways that black people are disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system and how they are relegated to a second-class tier in society as they were under the Jim Crow laws. The book talks about how the war on drugs in the 80s and 90s led to federal funding of local police departments to pursue drug-related crimes, and also led to insanely harsh prison sentences for drug-related crimes, such as mandatory minimums and 3-strike policies. And the federal prison population exploded from 300,000 people to 2.2 million people today, not including the 5 million people that are on parole today. And a disproportionate number of people that have been part of that prison population boom have been black people. There are 28 times more black people in our prisons today than there were in 1980, versus just 8 times more white people. Now, it's at this point that most conservatives will argue that that doesn't necessarily mean our criminal justice system is racist. It could just mean that black people are committing more crimes.
The fact that everybody jumps from there's inequality and therefore there is inequity. Just because there's inequality does not mean there was inequity.
However, this just isn't the case. You see, when we think of individuals in our prison population, we have a tendency to think of them as violent thugs. Like Martha Stewart, for instance. However, most criminologists agree that the boom in our prison population has been related to our change in our sentencing laws for drugs, not necessarily more criminality. There are more people in our prison system today for drug-related crimes than there were in our prison system in 1980 for all crimes combined. And as you've probably guessed by now, the people charged for these drug-related crimes have been disproportionately black. Studies have shown that black people get admitted to prison for drug charges 13 times higher than white people do. However, study after study has shown that black people neither consume nor sell drugs at a higher percentage than white people do. The truth is that white people love drugs just as much as black people do. No surprise there. And not only that, but people have a tendency to buy their drugs from people of similar socioeconomic background as themselves and of the same race. In other words, your stoner friend Jeff is probably not purchasing his drugs from some inner city thug. He's probably buying it from someone like him, white, middle class, and is way too into the band The Shins. I mean, seriously, Jeff, if I have to listen to new slang one more time, I'm gonna beat your legs. Which dispels the myth that the inner city is somehow the epicenter of the drug trade. Despite the fact that white people consume and deal drugs at the same rate as black people do, they do not get arrested at the same rate that black people do. Not only do black people get arrested more for drug-related crimes, but they also get searched more as well. An analysis of NYPD's infamous stop and frisk program showed that 85% of the people that were stop and frisked were black, despite the fact that guns and drugs were found at a lower rate than they were on white people.
In the course of 1 year, I've been stopped 7 times by law enforcement officers. Was I speeding sometimes? Sure. But the vast majority of the time, I was pulled over for nothing more than driving a new car in the wrong neighborhood or some other reason just as trivial.
You see, white people are kind of like your annoying friend Jeff, who talks to you endlessly about the new Shins album during class, yet the teacher doesn't seem to notice or mind. Yet the second you tell Jeff to shut up, the teacher turns around and scolds you for talking in her class. So to say that black people are getting shot by the police in proportion to how much they're getting arrested and searched is flawed, because black people shouldn't be getting arrested and searched at the rates that they are. And the impact on black communities has been devastating. Almost 1 out of 3 black men has been charged with a felony. And the problems don't stop once you manage to make it out of the prison system. As a matter of fact, they might have just begun. If you were one of the lucky ones and you managed to get off on parole, one of the terms of your parole could be that you have to be employed. But the problem is that once you're charged as a felon, employers can legally discriminate against hiring you, and studies have shown that it makes it almost impossible for you to get a job. And you are banned from getting several types of professional licenses, which is kind of like requiring someone to beat Usain Bolt in a race and then breaking their legs at the beginning of the race. And then if they find it difficult to survive because they can't can't find a job, they're also denied public housing and certain types of government benefits. This is why recidivism amongst ex-felons is so high, who are left with no other choice but to return to illicit activity. This is sort of like how you end back up with your she-devil ex Becky. Despite the fact that she sucks the soul out of you and degrades your self-esteem, you realize that there's no other women willing to date you but her. However, the narrative still remains that if black people just didn't commit these crimes, they wouldn't have any problems. The issue with this, though, is the way our laws are written to be much more lenient on white people than they are on blacks. For instance, if you were caught carrying 28 grams of crack cocaine, you would go to prison for 5 years. However, you would have to be carrying 18 times that amount in cocaine to get the same sentence. This is despite the fact that crack and cocaine are the same exact drug, just in different forms. This clearly favors white people who consume more pure cocaine than black people who consume more crack. Or consider the crime of driving under the influence of alcohol. You would think that the punishment for a DUI would be severe. However, it's generally just a fine and a misdemeanor charge. This is despite the fact that deaths from drunk driving are much higher than deaths from drug overdoses, which is once again very convenient for white people who constitute 78% of drunk driving arrests. It's kind of like how when your ex-girlfriend Becky cheats on you with your friend Jeff, yet claims that you're somehow still worse because you decide to watch one new episode of Game of Thrones without her. With all that being said, there are a few flaws in Michelle Alexander's book. She doesn't give a great explanation as per why, if drug consumption in white and black communities is similar, why violent crime in black communities is much higher, which could be an alternative explanation as per why there's more policing in black communities than there is in white communities, or as Stringer Bell from my favorite show The Wire puts it,
it's the fight for the territory that be bringing the bodies, and the bodies that bring the police.
Also, while she does give ample evidence to show how the war on drugs has disproportionately affected black communities, she does not provide enough evidence, in my opinion, to show that the war on drugs was racist in intent. And it gets a little bit conspiracy-ish on that issue. With all that being said, I'm going to give this book 4.5 stars out of 5. It's an excellent starting point for those who want to learn more about the inequalities in our criminal justice system and also understand a broader context of some of these social movements such as Black Lives Matter. So guys, that's my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and tune in next time on Ryan's Rants.